Hey y'all, and welcome to Learn to Quilt Lesson 6. Before we get started putting our quilt top and the batting and the backing fabric all together, I wanted to show you a few items that I used in order to make this process easier. The first is a temporary spray adhesive. There's different brands out there. Some of them are called basting spray. You can find them usually either in the quilting department or the Notion sewing department in a fabric store. You want to make sure it's temporary so that it does wash out. But I have found that this is a real lifesaver when putting the things together. You can sew through it, it doesn't gum up your needle, and it really helps the layers stay together and helps for an easier sewing. The other thing that I use is curved safety pins, and these you can usually find in the quilting department. It looks like a regular safety pin, except the bottom part is curved like that. Kind of looks like they're bent. These just allow for easier access. You don't really have to lift up the quilt when you're putting them in. You can use regular safety pins. These are just a little bit easier. But these are the two items I would recommend using. These are what I use. And as always, you know, hello Twix. There's a lot of different ways to put together a quilt as far as putting the top, the back, and the batting together. I'm just going to show you one way, and that's the way that I do it on my quilts. I have found that that's the easiest, but it's definitely not the only way to do it. There are lots of different ways out there. So I'm going to grab my quilt top that I finished, my batting that we rolled on the pool noodle in the last lesson, and my backing fabric, which I have pressed. I'm also going to grab some masking tape, or you can use painter's tape, and go to a nice flat surface. I'm going to be using my living room floor that I have swept and mopped, so it's nice and clean. And then we will get started laying out our quilt. Okay, so I'm actually going to show you two different ways to do this. I use two different ways, just generally depending on how big my quilt is. This method here I usually use if I have a bigger quilt, just because there's just a lot of fabric and to keep it nice and flat. So what I've done is I've taken my backing fabric and I've put it wrong side up, and then I've taped it all the way down. Now to tape it, you want it taut, but don't stretch it. You're just basically making sure that it stays nice and flat. Then what I'll do is I will take my my spray adhesive, and I will do a nice thin layer of spray adhesive all over it. You can do it in sections and just do one part, and then when you lay out your batting, then do the next part and the next part. If you're worried about overspray, just don't go all the way to the edge. But as I said, I mean, it does come up with water, so. But I'll put my adhesive down. Then I will take my pool noodle that has my batting on it, and I will start on the edge. And again, if you want to do the spray in sections, then you can do it here. And I will lay my batting down, flatten it out. It will be nice and flat. It will adhere with these the spray, but if you do need to lift it up or something and reposition it, you can. You just want to make sure it's nice and flat all the way around. Then you can move on. You can either spray another section or whatever, roll out your batting a little bit more, flatten it down, make sure there's no wrinkles, because if you have wrinkles, then you're going to get lumps. So you want to make sure everything's flat, and you would continue on. Once you have your batting all out, you would do another thin coat of your spray adhesive, then you would take your quilt back, or I'm sorry, your quilt top, and you would basically do the same thing. You're going to, and again, you can roll your quilt top on a pool noodle as well, if you so choose, but you're going to put your quilt top and make sure that you leave at least 2 inches all the way around. Don't take your quilt top all the way to the edge. Make sure you leave at least 2 inches, but you're going to lay your quilt top down, same thing, flatten it out. Make sure it's all nice and flat, and you would continue on. Now, once this is all done, then I will go ahead and take my curved safety pins, and I usually safety pin in about every square or every other square, just depending. Now, your adhesive is going to keep it together. I just like to do this for extra security. If for whatever reason you don't want to use the spray adhesive, you can use just the pins. You're just going to have to use a lot more because the pins are going to be the only way holding your layers together. You can also, I've seen people, they baste the quilt together, which is basically taking thread and a needle and making gigantic stitches and just basting it together with stitches. That's also a way to do it. I just find this is the easiest to use, okay, to do. So once I had all 3 layers together, sprayed, pinned, then I can pull up my tape. I'll go ahead and roll it back on the pool noodle, and then I'm ready to quilt it. So I'm going to take all this off, and then I'm going to show you the other way that I do when it's a smaller quilt. Sometimes I'll use a different way, and I'll show you that one. Okay, for this other method, basically the same concept, you're just doing it in a different order. For this way, I will actually start with my batting first. And I normally don't tape the batting down. You can, I normally don't. Then I would do the same thing, is spray, usually in sections, my spray adhesive on there. Then I would lay my backing fabric right side up on top of my batting. On this, you can pretty much match your edges because you want your backing fabric and your batting to be pretty much the same size. So you would do the same thing, lay it out, spread it out, and you would work the whole quilt that way. Once this is done, you're going to flip everything over and do the same thing with the quilt top, and I'll show you that. All right, so I flipped everything over. I have my backing fabric and my batting. Same thing, I'm going to spray a light coat of adhesive and then lay my quilt top down, making sure that there's at least 2 inches on each edge. Spread that out, go back and use my pins. Either method will work. The main thing, no matter what method you use to do this, the main thing is to remember is everything has to be flat. You don't want any wrinkles, any puckers, any folds, anything like that, because at this point, if there's anything in either the top, the batting, or the backing, it's going to stay. You're going to end up quilting that into your quilt. Especially the batting and the backing, it's very, very easy to end up with puckers or a fold or a little pleat or something in it, and you won't even notice it's there until you're done with your quilt. So make sure that no matter what method you use, you end up with a very flat, smooth section. Once you're done with everything, roll it up on your pool noodle, and you'll be ready for the next lesson. Hey, we are in the home stretch. So I'm gonna get this quilt put together, and we'll be ready for next week.